Herzlich willkommen bei Wein am Limit, liebe Walinauten. Mehr Spaß im Glas wollen wir heute Abend haben mit Eben Sadie und seinem Columella. 20 Jahrgänge sind es nun, die es gibt von diesem Wein, und wir probieren gleich zusammen mit Eben in einem Zoom-Interview 16, 17, 18. Und ich behaupte ja immer, dass in den 20 Jahren viel passiert ist und die Lernkurve in den letzten Jahren natürlich ganz enorm war. Also die Weine haben sich stilistisch schon ein bisschen entwickelt. Bin mal gespannt, was der Meister sagt. Auf jeden Fall 3 große Jahre, weil das ist ein Wein auch für Eltern, die gerne ihren Kindern was vererben wollen, aber manchmal ist es doch schwer, nicht vorher vielleicht schon mal, der eine oder andere vielleicht hat doch schon mal genascht. Also mit anderen Worten, kauft man von jeder Flasche am besten 2, damit man auch was zu vererben hat. In dem Sinne, Columella, großer südafrikanischer Wein, ursprünglich mal Syrah Mourvèdre, heute mit einer Vielzahl von Sorten, und dann fragen wir doch mal den Meister, wie es so ist, und schauen mal nach Südafrika.
So, hello everybody here. Oh, there he is. Hello, Mr. Eben Sadie. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Hendrik. Thank you very much for having us. I'm just glad whenever technology works in the Swartland. So the fact that I can hear you and see you is already an achievement.
All right. Well, another achievement is, I mean, it's harvest time now in South Africa. I guess you must be very busy, and I'm sorry for, let's say, interrupting you here at your really toughest time of the year.
Yeah, not nearly as sorry as I am, but yeah, no, the thing is now we're busy. It's been a very cool vintage. It's one of our coolest vintages in the last 20 years, and it's the latest vintage I've certainly had. So I've never picked grapes this late. So I'm actually busy planting poles and doing water lines and because my work of March have started. So the fact that the vintage is late, I can't. So, you know, the team in the vineyard, in the winery is going. I'm involved with the picking, get everything organized, pick grapes till about 10, 11 in the morning. And then usually we stop picking because it might get warm. And the rest of the days we're busy with an incredible development here at the Domain. It's the last vineyard that we'll be planting on actually where the winery in the whole Domain is situated. So I'm busy with that now.
Which varieties are you planting? And this probably brings now the story to your red icon wine, which is called Columella. I think this is where the whole Eben Sadie story, or the Sadie family story, starts. So, and I recall at the beginning, you only had a Syrah and Mourvèdre. I think it was an 80-20 ratio. So now you're planting other varieties.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, you know, I've always had and have been of the opinion that very many grape varieties in the world, especially in the New World, is being planted because of fashion or trends or consumer index. So, you know, people might like Syrah, might be a trend, so then you plant Syrah, or then Chardonnay, and then people plant Chardonnay, then it's Pinot Grigio, then people plant Pinot Grigio. So, but I always have said you shouldn't plant for any kind of marketing strategy or position. I think you must plant what belongs in the site. And once you've done that and you have figured out how to farm that particular variety well, from that, hopefully the best possible wine for that terroir can come. And obviously then when you have the quality, then you can work on all the rest. So in the Swartland here in South Africa, obviously Shiraz has been the kind of main red variety. A little bit of Mourvèdre was planted when I joined the region in 1996, 1997. And there's been like a little bit of Carian, a little bit of Grenache, but not too much of other things. So the realization now with the drought and global warming and all of that has been to plant new varieties. So I've literally planted in the last years, and not only here at the Domain, we farm 18 small domains from here up into the West Coast. So some are small, some are 3-hectare domains, but we have this small little parcel pockets all the way up. So for the reds, I've planted Agriogitica from Greece, Aglianico from Italy, Negramaro from Italy. I've planted Pontac, which is a historic red grape from the Cape. I've planted Alicante Boucher, or in Spain it's called Garnacha Tintorera. I've planted Cunoise and Terre Noire. They're from the southern Rhone, the warmer part of the Rhone Valley in the south. I've planted Trincadera, Tinta Francesa, Tinta Amarella, which is Trincadera. I've planted I've planted Bastardo, which is kind of the warmer brother of Trousseau. I mean, Trousseau should actually be planted in a very cool climate like Jura, but there's a variant that's been planted historically up in Lodi, in California and all of that. We've planted some of that. For the whites, I mean, we're discussing now the Columella, but for the whites, we've planted Grillo, Catarato, Fiano, Acertico from Greece. The southern Italian whites, we've planted Cinsault Blanc. Pardon?
Alvarinho?
Alvarinho needs a cooler climate. So
To the coast?
I think we could do fruit-driven kind of wines here with it, but you know, for acidity and structure, we've really been focusing on varieties that can give a lot of acidity. And Acertico really doing well on the coast. We've made some wines of these varieties. So, I mean, it's not being schizophrenic, not having a clear idea. We have a clear idea. The idea is we've already got grapes here with incredible texture, tannin, structure, color, aromatics, but I think going forward, we always going to struggle to get acidity into the wines. And therefore, I've planted grapes that get ripe pretty early. So these are all varieties that I've been picking now the last couple of years around 12.8, 13.2 alcohol. Some of them even as low as 11.8, 12.5. And then when I pick them at that alcohol level, it's not that I'm picking them early or forcing it. They are actually ripe
At that level.
at 12.
Yeah.
I mean, Garnacha Tintorera, you can pick here at 11.5% alcohol and it's completely ripe. And it has a beautiful acid. And then if you have maybe your Mourvèdre sitting at 14% alcohol or your Shiraz at 14.5, when you blend them together, you have a beautiful wine of 13. So I think it's the balance of poles, and I think with the hydric stress and the droughts, and we've just been through 4 years of extreme drought, I'm looking at how these grape varieties they thrive in this warm, dry climate. So, you know, whereas Shiraz really, when it gets warm and dry, it shrivels up, it gets those jammy flavors, and that's not what you want. You want a grape that even under hydric stress keeps its freshness. So that's what I've been busy with.
So this basically brings us to the story of Columella, I think 20 years ago, when you started the project and the first wine. By the way, I have 16, 17, and 18 lined up here behind me. Which order is the best?
Pardon, which?
Which order is the best?
The best order is, I think, to start with 16. Okay. Start with the oldest of the three. Obviously, the Columella, things have changed. When we started making the wine, the original productions were, like you mentioned, 80% Syrah and 20% Mourvèdre. But in the last years, we've increased the percentage of Grenache, Cinsault, Tinta Barocca, which is a grape that does very well here in the Swartland, and Carignan. So when we taste the three wines, there's actually, even within these three wines, there's a little bit of a shift. So the big change is earlier this year, I think you would have received that newsletter that I wrote. We did a 20-year vertical of Columella, where we basically look back at the last 20 years. What have we done? What was our realignments? You know, where did we decide, okay, we're going, now we're doing this? I don't like to make too many changes in the winery all the time, because if you make too many changes in the end, you don't know where the wine really came from, what really created that quality in the wine. So when we make changes, we make them very, very slow. And the first 10 years of the Columella, I think we picked maybe too ripe. You know, we were picking in the 14.5, 14.8% bracket, whereas now everything is between 12.8 and 13.5, 13.8. I think we extracted too much out of the grapes when we fermented in terms of pigeage. We don't do any more pigeage. We just do one bucket over. We take literally 10 buckets out of the bottom of the tap and put them over the cuves to wet the cap. And the last thing we did is there's areas in the world where French oak's really good for wines, and the wines really respond very well to the French oak. But here in our area with our warmer climate, riper fruit, wines that's inherently got a low redox potential, inclined to be more oxidative, I think new wood is not the best strategy forward. So we've moved over into, we still have some small barrels, but only 10% new, only for 1 year. And then we rack the wine over and we put it in very old foudres, which are this Stukvas, you know, that's about Stukvas for Columellas between 15 and 22 years old now. So there's no oak influence anymore. Yeah. So 16 was the last normal vintage of the recent half decade. In terms of 15, we still had good rain. So we had a good winter in 15, we had good moisture in the soil, and come February 2016, we saw probably the most compressed harvest in my memory. So what happened in 2016, it wasn't a super late vintage, it was late, but then everything got pressed from the back in. So all the late varieties was on time. So we literally picked our whole crop in 3 weeks. Normally we pick for 6 weeks. In 16, we picked everything in 3 weeks. We had the moisture of the winter of 15. The grapes were full ripe. And when you smell this wine, this 2016, it's very granular. It's got beautiful tannins. The tannins are quite open. You can see that it's ripe tannins. The wine's in a way approachable, but I mean, as I always say, the Columella wines are best when you keep them for 5-8 years at least before you open them. So this wine being 5 years is just starting to be interesting. Yeah. At this point.
Yeah. If I may interrupt here at this stage, it's, because you were referring to the first 10 years, and I've been obviously following Columella for quite a while, and I even have 2000 in my cellar, and once in a while I go and taste one of the older vintages. And I think, and that not being said in a negative way, but I think you were much more caught in many, or attracted to many regions of Europe. I think especially France, I think especially some vintages remind me, I think it depends really on the vintage, but sometimes you were very much in the Priorat style, sometimes more in the Hermitage style. So with this wine, wow, I have to say, drinking it so silent here in almost like a monastery way here, or like monks, you know, where we just it's just us two. I think it has reached a kind of a suppleness and a finesse, and I think it's incomparé. So you can't compare it to anything. It's become a style of its own, and I get lots of earthy flavors in this wine.
You know, the thing is, I think the 2000s. You know, the 2000s was the time where I think it wasn't just for us here in the Swartland or in South Africa, it was for the whole world. I think everybody was picking riper, everybody was extracting a bit more and all of that. I think no man is an island. But I do think today we're making a Swartland wine. I have no more template in my head of what the Columella can and cannot be. all that I know is if I farm today Columella is 12 vineyards. If I farm the 12 vineyards best I can, and I'm true and honest to those 12 vineyards across all those varieties and soils, hopefully we'll get a wine that has a true impression of what the terroir here is. And like you say, when you say that it's kind of its own thing, you know, when you eliminate the oak, you make the wine less international. When you eliminate over-extraction, you make it less international. So I think in a way, I kind of cut my umbilical cord with Europe. I still drink a lot of European wines, but I'm not looking at Europe for the future. I'm just looking outside my door here. And we need to be our own people, and we need to be our own soil. So we got to farm our soils right. We got to adapt our viticulture to our climate, and make the wines that this earth really should be making. So 16 was kind of halfway into the new way of producing the Columella, because from 2000 to 2009 we made the Columella the same style and the same way, and now from 2010 to 2019 we made it again all in one style or one way. And we've just done our 20-year review. And the one thing Paul and myself decided is, you know, we used to de-stem everything, and then we started working with 70% whole bunches, 80% whole bunch. We're de-stemming again a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So I think not everybody's clear about the fact, what does it mean? Why? Because whole bunch is a kind of a new, let's say, still a new thing to many.
Yeah, so from 2000 to 2010, when the red grapes came to the cellar, we took all the stems off, so we just had the berries in the tank. And then when the climate started getting warmer and drier, one way of making a wine kind of quickly look fresh is you add stems. The stems have a little bit of a greener tannin. They're a little bit more sappy. They have also some acids in them, and they kind of bring a freshness into the wine, but all your wines become a little bit stemmy in character. And we now see that it had a good effect on the wines over now the next 10 years, because the wines did get fresher. But we shouldn't use stems to make the wines fresher. We must use grapes to make them fresher. So, and the other issue with stems here is, you know, when you look at L'Alebis Leroy in Burgundy, and like in the warmer vintages for Domaine de la Romanée Conti, or some of these domains, you know, they will add more stems. But one has to understand that a stem in Burgundy is much riper than a stem here. Mm-hmm. So, and they have much more acidity than we have. So the one thing that's in the stem is an element called potassium. And if you have a big whole bunch fermentation going on, and you have a lot of potassium in your wine, for our wines, it's even got a negative effect on our acid. Mm. So the question is, what at the end became, was it worthwhile to add the stems to have the perceived freshness, but lose some acidity and also lose some purity of fruit? Or is the better thing to plant the right grape varieties, de-stem more, and just have the freshness from the fruit and the purity, and keep all of your acidity because you don't have the potassium from the stems in the tank? Mm. And that's kind of where we're now in year 20 with our dialogue. So now, the next 10 years, we're going to de-stem 70% and only do 30% whole cluster. We'll do this now for 10 years. And in 10 years' time, I'll tell you that was really a bad idea. or I'll tell you that was really a good idea. But, you know, in wine, you must take time, because some people will try something for 1 year, but you can't, because you must do it in a warm year, a dry year, a wet year, a cold year, an early vintage, a late vintage. You need time.
It's in the end, it's very much what I've seen about you. I think the wines, once you came back from Europe and really focused on your South African project and family business, your wines became more sincere and became more interesting. They were already interesting at the beginning, I think, because the message you came across with was at a very early stage, was about freshness, was about origins, was about thinking what could be a style of South African wines. But I think the last 10 years, and from going from one extreme to the other, like about the destemming process, I think always you need to balance it and you need to find the solution in the middle. And of course, everybody gets attracted. That's why I was asking, what's now about whole cluster? And yeah, a lot of people are just now relying on this, but making a lot of mistakes at the same time. And
absolutely. Now, I see wines with whole cluster 100%, and then you look at the wine from a certain producer and you think this was the last thing in the world this wine needed.
Yeah.
The great wine, I think what you said, the great wine is not made in the extremes.
No.
It's made in a good, solid middle ground. You don't need to be an extremist of any form. Your wine shouldn't be a manifestation. It should be a record of the terroir, not a manifestation. There's a difference.
Yes, I agree. 100%.
This 2017, in all the 20 years that we bottled, this was one of the top 3 wines we produced. The 17.
Yeah. Because when I really like the 16, it seems very supple. It seems very fine. When I sniff this wine, this seems to be more on you get a black olive, you get a little plummy, a little licorice. The flavor profile seems to be a little bit more warm, though.
Yeah, this one has 17 was warmer than 16, but it was you have more like that black graphite and all the darker aromatics on the wine. So but I like 17 because when you look at the Swartland, the place, it's a dry place, it's a warm place, and kind of this wine is very similar to the landscape. For me, it really resonates the landscape here. 17 was a really good harvest from a perspective. It came in very even, very harmonious throughout the season. The only thing is it was in 16, we didn't have a lot of rain. And this was the first year of the drought. And so we had a very small crop. We had much less fruit this year. We did a big green harvesting in the end of November 16, going for the 17 vintage, because it was really dry and quite warm. So, but I like the wine. It in a way reminds me quite ironically of the 2009. These are wines that you just need to put away.
Yeah, I think, let's say expectation-wise nowadays, where we have a lot of icon wine drinkers, and let's say Columella is an icon wine. It's though an icon wine, which I think is made in a different style. You really need to wait for this wine, though. Yes, you can drink it, you can have fun, and if you like freshness and if you like the more croquant, the crunchier taste of a wine, this is fine at the moment. But you were right. I mean, in the 16, you can see a little bit what is the direction and where it can go. This seems to be quite muscular and compact.
Very compact. You see, fine wine is a game of patience, and unfortunately, you need 2 things for fine wine. The one thing is you need space, because you need to have many bottles, and the other thing is you also need the capital and the finance to get the wines. But I always say it's one thing. I also collect a lot of wines from all over the world, and there are definitely wines that I'm buying. There's wines I'm buying. You can't even drink them if they're not 15 years old. So you must just wait. And we don't drink the Columella at our home if it's not 8 years old. Okay. Minimum 8. It should be 10, but 8 is like a good number. So yeah, you must wait. It's like you know, one of my favorite producers in the world is Bruno Chiacosa, you know, in Piemonte. And when you buy the wines of Bruno Chiacosa, when you buy it, you just leave it in the box. You don't even open the box. You put it in the cellar, and you cannot open the box before it's 15 years old. Then you can start looking at the bottles at 15, which doesn't mean you're going to drink them. You can look at them. And then when they are 20 years old, you can start to drink them.
Even I like your, let's say you are a man who's driven by fantasies, by virtues, and about, let's say, the perfect world. I can tell you, in my world, I open Giacosas even too young, and I enjoy them because I want, and I refer always to Jean-Bernard Delmas, Bernard Delmas from Orient.
Yeah.
And do you know what he said? A great wine is always great to drink.
No, it is. But I particularly like wines. It's like when you build a new building. It looks beautiful on day one. But once the plants have started growing on the walls and it's gone a little bit, I think the wine, for me, it's really a patience thing. But I agree. It doesn't mean the Columella is not good now. It's fantastic now, but it's better when you wait.
And one thing, you were stepping out from your 13.5 policy. This has 14% alcohol.
It's 13.78.
Ah, okay. So you went the way up instead of down.
No, you must round to the closest number.
Exactly. So
I don't care.
It was a little bit unfair. No, but I like 17. I mean, if you want to drink a Columella now, but what makes you think of that this could be one of the 3 greatest Columellas? And which are the 3 greatest Columellas, in your opinion?
2002, which was the wine when I bottled it. Of all the years, I thought wouldn't age.
Yeah.
So I was wrong there. And then I would say the next really great one is 2010. So it's 2010 and 17.
Wow. And what do these vintages have in common?
Depth and texture. Not like big, like they're like very, very finely stitched, like a lot of tannin, very compact, very finely stitched, very dense, very tight inner core. I think, yeah, they're not necessarily the prettiest of the wines, but they are definitely the wines that, in my view, for me, my definition of a great wine is, you've just heard how I am about wine. I would like to drink the Columella when it's 30 years old. And then I don't want to sit at a table and the wine must kind of hang in there. The wine must be in a good state. Like when you open a Bordeaux, it's 35 years old, it's in immaculate condition. That's just the best wine experiences of my life. Piedmont wine, 30 years old, you open it and you think it's 10 years old, but actually it's 30 years old. You know?
But I think this very much accounts for Columella. And I mean, anybody who's watching this video, I hope it's okay if I forward them your booklet.
By all means, the notes is for everybody.
Super, because I think you did that with your cellar master. You did the tasting, and I think, or I recall, we did a tasting in Germany a couple of years ago.
Must come back.
We were driving in taxi, and you told me, Hendrik, I'm a very happy man because all of my wines showed very young.
Yeah, no, this is, as long as the wines, I think when you start paying 100 euros for wine, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing paying 20 euros for wine, but once you start paying 100, 200, 300 euros for a bottle of wine, that wine must be good for the time. You don't know who the owner is. Often the owner becomes somebody that didn't buy it. So the wine needs to be good for the time. So yeah, because 100 euros is maybe not in Germany, but yeah, it's a lot of money.
Hey,
so
I can tell you, I mean, not only because of COVID, even before and I think after, €100 is a lot of money for a bottle of wine.
That's a lot of money for wine.
There is always a big discussion about what is a wine worth, especially in Germany, I think. But I think it's all over the world. And how I mean, what would you define? Why is it like? Why do people pay 100? What are some of the reasons? Why do pay? Some people can afford, for sure. Some people just want it, but
I think there are two categories. I think there's people that buy because it feels like the right thing to do. But then I think there's people that generally can assess the quality and they can taste it, you know. And that, in all fairness, I mean, if the Columella was made if I was making that exact wine in Barolo, I would be selling it for €300.
Yeah, or in Bordeaux or in south of France or somewhere.
Yeah. So it's also got to do with the lay of the land and the history and all of that. So the intensity of what this wine is produced is not any dissimilar from any Grand Cru producer in Burgundy or in Bordeaux. We're not doing anything less than they are doing. We are farming at the same level of technology. Every cut on every vine is on a 90-degree angle with a sharp scissor, done in the right place with people that know why. We're not messing about. But you have an area where if you're in Pomerol and you do it, you're always going to get a little bit more for your wine than doing it out here in the Swartland or, some other places in the world. I think it's very much just related to history and reputation.
Yeah. And infrastructure. I mean, obviously in certain markets there are people, and I think you can look at China or look towards the Far East, you can see there's more and more people now who can afford great wines. So and willing to pay, and they're quite eager, let's say hungry, I think too.
In the beginning, the East was very hungry just to buy, and now they're hungry for the information. So it's I think the flow of information is interesting, and I think, yes, Bordeaux is very important, Burgundy is very important, Piemont's very important, Tuscany is very important, Rioja is very important. You have very many regions of the world, but I mean, for me as a wine fanatic, I want to know all wines of the world. So I even, I drink Californian wines, I drink wines from Armenia, from all over the world. I'm interested in people that go into very difficult places and make great wine. Mm-hmm. I think to make another great wine in Pomerol, okay, it's kind of done, right? But to go into a really difficult place and do the pioneering work with no blueprint, nothing, that's also remarkable. Yeah. Hi, Bianca.
Yes, Bianca. Bianca is just coming home. She says, we're still going home.
Okay. The last one, 18.
Okay, let's go to 18. And when I sniffed it, it does have a very earthy, let's say to the 17, you find a lot of the blueberry and the licorice and then let's say a dark berry flavor. Here you find also a warm profile, but a more earthy, more truffly almost, or wet earth style character. Well,
18.
I'm not sure if that's let's say just a moment where I'm drinking it, but this seems to be 17 seems to be from the three wines, the one which is like more a monument style, while 18 seems to be again that 16 style, but with a little bit more fruit.
Yeah, see, 18 is of the three the one with the most fruit, and so. Yeah, what happened in 18 is we had a very bad flowering on the Syrah. And this is the lowest percentage of Syrah ever in a Columella. So, yeah, the percentage of Grenache and Mauvert is much higher. Normally, the Syrah now is around 40%. But in this vintage, the Syrah was down to about 35%. And so you have a little bit more Grenache and Mauvert in comparison, because we pick the vineyard. So, when one vineyard doesn't have the production, it's not like we're trying to blend a formula. We blend the vineyards.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one ended up being a lot more fruity. And even when we released it from the get-go, normally when we release the Columella, the wine's very quiet and like kind of hiding and shy. This 18 was very open, and I think the only reason for that and for the lifted fruit is the fact that the percentage of the Mauvert and the Grenache and the Cinsault is higher. So, you know, and those are varieties that have lifted fruit element.
Mm-hmm.
So that is showing in the wine. And the Syrah is the darkest of all of those. So that's why the color is also slightly lighter than, say, 17.
It is. It reminds me from the, well, not looking at the color, but from the flavor profile, it reminds me a bit of a Chateauneuf du Pape, but old school Chateauneuf du Pape, where also you get a kind of a herbal touch, an ethereal touch in this wine. And then there is a slightly dry, you know, like almost like prunes, like very slightly, but very nice.
Yeah, this is the lowest alcohol we've had in a long. This one was 13.3. So far as that's low.
Just for the records, what do you think of people who look at? I just wrote a piece in our wine magazine, and sometimes I can get a little bit annoyed about that alcohol policy, which I prefer wines, of course, which don't have a lot, but I respect wines which have a lot and still are in balance. I mean, so I have no problems with it, really.
So 3 years ago, we did a seminar here, and I chose to show a very famous wine from France, very famous wine. And this wine, we imported a case of each of the wines. It was a tasting for 400 people. So it's a big tasting, you know, 400 people, 5 glasses for every person, 2,000 glasses on the table, a lot of wine.
Yeah.
When the wine arrives here, it needs to go through the Department of Agriculture. And because I'm not a qualified importer of wine, we had to give 1 bottle for analysis so that they could make sure that the wine, and it was expensive wine, right? So I was like, you know, 1 bottle of each. But okay, we had no choice, so we give. So this wine came back. So the alcohols in this wine was from 13.5, and the highest one was 16.2. Okay? But on all five wines, the alcohol on all the labels was printed 13.5. Now that same producer, I go to New York, and then you have all these hipster wine bars with their tattoos of 12 alcohol. They don't drink more than that.
Yeah.
And then the people are raving about this wine because it has a low alcohol. I know it's all bullshit because I have analyzed that wine and it goes up to 16%. So it's all in the mind.
Yeah. That was nice. Thank you.
If you in the world of wine have come to the point where you need to discuss the alcohol levels, I think you're not drinking enough.
Yeah. I agree. You know, in Germany, it was in the 60s, 70s, and in the 80s, people always asked for, I mean, people who didn't have diabetes, but people who just wanted to be, I think, cool. So the only thing they could contribute in a wine tasting, what's the residual sugar on this and what's the acidity? And I said, like, when I was very young at that stage, and I was observing the older guys, and I was thinking, like, this is really silly. They don't talk about the wine.
I prefer to talk about the wine. So, for example, I actually think this wine, if this one had more than 13.3% alcohol, this wine would become warm.
Yeah.
You know, you can already see all the fruits like at the, not the limit, but they're at that fragile point where if we picked riper, they would have gone too mature. You know, but also just to pick early to make a fresh wine, that's sometimes you don't have the expression of the terroir either.
Yeah.
So you need to be in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And you need to farm your alcohol level. So if you have a vineyard that gives too much alcohol, you need to go see, is the fruit hanging too late to get ripe? Do you have too much crop that it hangs too long?
Yeah.
Do you have too much sun on the berries? Do you need to leave more leaves to have shade in that area? You need to prune different. Do you need to put maybe more mulching on the soil, get more shading on the roots of the vines? Do you need to aerate the soil more? Maybe leave your cover crops vertical, not mow them flat. So for every vineyard, when we look at the vineyards in the cellar, we kind of make assessments, and according to those assessments, we'll farm that vineyard to work in this wine.
Yeah, okay.
And not sit in the cellar and try and make like a blend with little test tubes and things. That's not how you make wine.
Well, let's say like an alchemist. No,
with a candle and your dog.
I was in a panel not too long ago, and there was one interesting thing. It was a professor from a wine university here in Germany. He said, like, when you pick too late, it could easily happen that that flavors later on in the wine will mask the minerality. So rather go for earlier date. But I think many people now mistaken this by picking sour grapes and making a thin wine. And again, we come to the mantra of balance.
I think the pendulum was on the right, with 14.5, 15.5, 200% new oak. And now it's gone, the pendulum swung completely. And somewhere between the two exteriors, there's no real logic. And again, the great wine doesn't live in extremes. The people that I've certainly met in the world and have been privileged to visit in my life, and I've been to really so many great cellars in my life, when you meet the individuals, they are balanced people. They're not freaks. The freaks don't make the great wines on the planet. It's the calculated people of good mind and measure.
Yeah, it is. Balanced mindset. Eben Sadie, thank you so much for your contribution here and taking some time and during struggling harvest time. I was just looking for words here. And we look forward to the next 20 years of Columella. It's been a ride. And
thank you very much.
I wish you and your team very well. Thank you, and showing all your passion. And always, I think what was nice talking to you is the mindset, certainly, let's say, reasonable and a little bit rebellious, and something in between. You've become measured.
Yeah. Well, you must be measured, but it doesn't mean you need to be boring. But thank you very much for the time. I mean, Hendrik, we've been Wein Limit and us, we've been 20 years. It's 20 years that we've been knowing each other, and you've sold a lot of our wines, and we've tasted a lot of wines together. And I hope that I can come and visit you in person soon. We need to taste the Palladius vertical. 20 years. Oh, that's a complicated story.
It can hold up very nicely.
No, it does.
Not too long ago, I had a 2008 Magnum, and I said, probably we need to drink it quick. By the time we drank it, I realized we drank it much too quick.
Give our wines time, please. Enjoy your evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Eben. All the best. And bon vendage. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Okay, so ja, vielen Dank. Das war Eben Sadie aus dem Swartland, Südafrika. Es ist lang geworden, aber mit, glaube ich, vielen, vielen spannenden Momenten. Und 16, 17, 18, tolle Vertikale. 17, den Eben ja als großen Wein bezeichnet, als einen der größten 3, die er je gemacht hat. Mir haben die anderen aber auch sehr, sehr gut gefallen. Speziell 16, der immerhin schon mal ein bisschen was gezeigt hat. Und 18, der, glaube ich, in einer ähnlichen Range läuft. Ansonsten wünsche ich euch mehr Spaß im Glas und bleibt gesund, und schön, dass es dieses Format gibt. Tschüss.